All right, we should all be live. Lots of thumbs up there at the bottom. All right, hello everyone. My name is Kogan Shimizu, and I'll be starting off the Open KG curriculum session. Joining me today, we will have Glenn Clatworthy, who is here at the speaker. I'll let him introduce himself in like a slide, and then Steve Gillespie, who cannot make it today unexpectedly. So hopefully, um, we'll be able to track him down, and maybe he'll be able to join a little bit later. And hopefully nothing's wrong either. So yes, let's go ahead and get started. So as I said, this is the Open Knowledge Graph curriculum session. It unfortunately seemed to have the wrong description in the program today. It will not be a panel insofar that we did not invite specific panelists, but both Glenn, Steve, and I will be able to discuss more as a part of a community discussion after we've gone through essentially our slides and the state of the curriculum and all of that. So very briefly, my name is Cogan Shimizu again. I'm an assistant professor at Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio. I'm primarily interested in pattern-based ontology and knowledge engineering methods. And then, of course, as you might imagine with this particular talk, I am really interested in what are the effective ways for teaching these concepts so that students and therefore professionals can become skilled in these topics. And then I'll go ahead and let Glenn introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Glenn Clatworthy. As my bio mentions, I actually spent virtually my entire career at the American Public Broadcasting Service, where I focused on managing television metadata as well as archival media. Since I was managing a research service, I got very, very interested in the semantic web maybe 12 years or so. And that's led to a certain obsessive and compulsion with the subject.
Oh, sorry, Glenn. Didn't realize that you were done there. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining. So let's go ahead and get into the actual content of the talk. So today we're going to be talking about the sort of state of the curriculum right now. All good? Okay. The state of the curriculum. So, just kind of going over a broad overview of what the curriculum is and where it's located, and essentially giving an update from last year, this time, of what's changed and what's going on. Then we'll talk about a sort of case study of using the curriculum and how that might be looked at in the future. And then finally, we'll talk about the curriculum knowledge graph, which is essentially the glue that's going to be tying together the learning material and the sort of audiovisual material that also kind of explain these things in a multimodal way. Finally, then we'll have a small call to arms and a community discussion. So with that, so briefly, let me just give you a brief idea of what the curriculum looks like. So the curriculum is organized into what we would call learning paths, and learning paths consist of ordered set of modules. And then a module is essentially just an encapsulated article on a specific topic. The types of articles might be, what is a knowledge graph, right? Extremely introductory. Or on the other hand, it might be diving into the description logic axioms for describing actual formal ontology. We'll go ahead and take a look a little bit more in depth of what this actually looks like moving forward after the slides. Right now we have 10 contributors. Actually, quite a few more. We had 9 contributors that were students that were just interested as part of a course in filling out the some modules, and then we have a couple of people who have just written modules on the offshoot, and both Glenn, Steve, and I have all contributed our own. So we're the 3 regular coordinators. We do have a Slack channel in the Knowledge Graph Conference Slack called Open Curriculum. You're free to join. We are always looking for more contributors or people to help us think about the future of the curriculum and really advance the state of the curriculum. Right now, our meetings are 10 a.m. on Wednesdays, but it's a little bit fly by the seat of our pants for the summer because people are traveling and so on. The website here down at the bottom, the github.com, this is where the curriculum lives. It's a open source, fully transparent, open contribution curriculum. And we'll go ahead and get there really quickly, just so I can give you a quick walkthrough of what this looks like. 1 second to switch what I was sharing. Did that share correctly? Yes, looks like it did. Okay, so this is the top level overview of the Open Knowledge Graph curriculum. So it exists as a GitHub repository, which allows us to sort of leverage the transparency and open contributions of a wider community without really having a hierarchy beyond who's coordinating. And so what this allows us to do is we have the different pieces. There's code that might help us generate new module templates. We have a taxonomy that Glenn will talk about in a dozen slides or so. And then we have the actual curriculum and the contributing guidelines. Contributing guidelines we'll talk about in the community discussion, but the curriculum itself, as I said, consists of these modules, and then they have some metadata about them called levels, categories, and audiences. And then we have the learning paths, which are really a set of questions on how to do that. So what we're looking to do is to take these questions. Existing tools are not user-friendly. Why is this so complicated, right? And so what we want to be able to do is to link this particular question to a set of modules that actually answer this question. We have this down here. For example, what is OWL, the web ontology language? This is answered by taking a look at the modules called predicate logic, description logic, OWL, and then looking at RDFS, entailment regimes, and then OWL itself. These two are different sort of learning paths because one of them digs into the more academic side of what OWL looks like, and then RDFS looks and entailment regimes, and then to OWL kind of gives you a developer-oriented focus of what OWL is. I think this is our classic example of these parallel learning paths. Let's see. So when we look at the modules, there's a whole bunch of different modules that we have. We have Introduction to Discrete Mathematics for the academic learning, and then we have other sorts of broad survey-like modules, like what is a taxonomy? And when we go here, we have a full article on how to describe it. This draws information from written content, but also links to other parts of the curriculum. So when we go and we look at the subclass, we can go back to the curriculum. It's a sort of Wikipedia, right? But for knowledge graph knowledge graph topics and concepts. I think Steve, if he winds up getting here, will talk a little bit more about this, and then Glenn will talk about more of the taxonomy. The final point is that we also want to be able to link this to things that the Knowledge Graph Conference is sponsoring. So the Accidental Taxonomist by Heather Hedden has a book club, right? And so pieces of this article can be linked to the book club from the Knowledge Graph Conference. Okay, so I will go ahead and switch back to the slides. Great. Okay, so a case study. The case study is so this past spring I taught a course. It was a project based course in 15 weeks, and it uses the and will continue to use the Open Knowledge Graph curriculum as a basis for its lecture based material. So we do 5 weeks of lectures, tutorials, hands on exercises, and then 8 weeks of a project that the students are expected to implement end to end a knowledge graph. It covers the fundamentals to executing a specific methodology, which we call modular ontology modeling, as it's generally a pretty easy way of understanding and assembling a knowledge graph schema. And then the students then contribute back to the curriculum using it for like a midterm assignment. I think one of my students is actually in the audience, and I'm sure she'll tell me that it was an excellent program. So we have the 2023 outcomes. We had 3 teams of 3 students each, and they each chose an interesting self-motivated topic to make a knowledge graph about. We generated 3 new articles for the curriculum, and having the sort of access to the curriculum in a knowledge graph, or sorry, in an asynchronous, openly transparent way was extremely beneficial for their learning, because they could go back and reference it independent of the quality of their own notes. You could go ahead and take a look at this. The course is the CS 7810 Intro to Knowledge Engineering using knowledge graphs, and we can dig into that a little bit more deeply in the community discussion at the end of the talk. So now, moving forward, I will go ahead and introduce the knowledge graph curriculum, and then Glenn and Steve will talk later on. So, just as some background, we have the KGC knowledge graph. This is a sort of eat your own dog food idea, right? We want to have a formally represented and easily traversable representation of the KGC knowledge graphs. The knowledge graph conferences, what happened in them, who attended, who presented, what was spoken about, and all of that. But on the other hand, we also have the open curriculum, right, that has the modules, the concepts, and the sort of questions and learning material that you can use to learn about what is happening in any particular talk. And so the goal of the curriculum knowledge graph is to sort of fuse together the events that happen in the conference, as well as the events that the KGC sponsors outside of the conferences, like the book clubs, the knowledge espresso meetings, the project book club ontology groups. They all have different discussions, and so we want to be able to sort of raise the water level by providing a foundational concept taxonomy and learning material for any of the concepts that you might want to learn about, in order to more readily contribute back to the discussions, or more quickly jump into new events, sessions, speaking keynotes, or whatever at the KGC. So with this in mind, this is what we have for the schema of the curriculum itself. So we have the person who participates in specific events. A conference might be a type of event, so that's the KGC, but in the future we might incorporate the keynote sessions from other conferences. But we have the tutorials, you have sessions, workshops, keynotes, master classes, which is missing from the diagram, but we're in one now. And these events provide media. Sometimes it's transcripts, sometimes it's papers, slide decks, recordings of the talks themselves. And we want to be able to connect these to the modules. The module might reference a media, and media might cover a topic, but really that topic is the unifying concept between all of these different multimodal ways of addressing a specific concept. Glenn will talk a little bit more about the topic taxonomy and how those are organized. And I will need to check the speaker chat really quickly to see what's if Steve was able to join. But he'll talk about the events, participants, and themes. I probably should have gone to this slide next because this is everything that I just said. And yep, okay, moving on. So let me quickly check the speaker check to see if Steve was going to be able to make it. Oh, Steve says he doesn't have AirMeet access.
He is registered, so I'm wondering if he didn't get the email that we did directing us to this page.
Okay, 1 second. I have a link for him. Let me paste that really quickly. Sorry for those of you in the audience trying to figure this out. Right, Kirkland. Copy link. Okay. So I just went ahead and pasted that into the chat, so Steve should be able to log in using that link. I'll go ahead and skip to your slides, Glenn, and hopefully Steve can come back and introduce his pieces there.
Sounds good. I began to craft the taxonomy for the curriculum based on three primary sources. The first was an informal group that actually has been on Slack that was devoted to creating an ontology for KGC book club events. I believe it was for the very first book that we covered, which was Semantic Web for the Working Ontologist. So collectively, a group of people got together on a Notion site and came up with a basic list of terms that covered the kinds of things that you would see in, for example, a book index. The second source is the KGC conference events themselves that Cogan referenced a couple of minutes ago. On GitHub, there's an area where we do see what I believe are auto-generated URIs pointing to sessions, people, and also topics. And the final source is the open curriculum modules themselves, as Cogan has laid out for us very carefully. Next slide, please. All right, if you break down those three sources, you see that the topics covered actually cover some reasonably distinct areas. The ontology group came up with something that I think you would call, as I said, something similar to an index in a book, very specific concepts. The open curriculum modules tend to put these terms in context, in the context of learning paths. So there are some individual terms like OWL, but there also is the broader context of the learning process. The KGC conference events are really applied terms. You, as you can see, you see things like petroleum industry, supply chain management, things that don't always directly link to the kind of terms that you would be putting into a vocabulary. So the challenge is to come up with a single taxonomy that balances those three sources. I'm ready. The way I approached it, at least initially, and this is under review, is to break the taxonomy groups into basically three parts. Principles themselves, where you would see things like RDF, OWL, Sparkle, classes, properties, academic and career disciplines, the kinds of disciplines that people would be part of who would be interested in employing knowledge graphs. So that could be education, engineering, computer science, etc. And then there are the real world applications. As I showed you in the last slide, things like petroleum industry. So I'm trying to get a sense of how to balance those three basic categories. Next slide. What I came up with were 5 top concepts to try and fit everything under. First is applied knowledge graphs, like petroleum industry. The second is disciplines, like education or science. The third is principles, as in different categories of semantic web and knowledge graphs themselves. And finally, well, actually, 2 more. One is RDF sources, where you would find, for example, large collections of taxonomy terms that might be pertaining to a subject, things like agravoc, and so other reference materials. And finally, standards and recommendations, which includes not only the W3C recommendations, but also specific standards that might pertain to any kind of discipline. Ready? Now, here's an example of one area where we need to think about the balancing of the terms. Here, we see all different kinds of industry clustered under a larger concept, industry. But another way of balancing that out might be to have a topic for energy, another topic for information technology, another topic for professional services. Use those as subtopics and then create a SCOS related connection for them. So, do you put all of the industry things together or do you separate them out into various disciplines and then make cross connections? Next slide, please. I've chosen, at least in this pass, to begin with the free and I'm afraid no longer supported version of top braid. So here's an example of how I have created a particular term in the top braid's main interface. Next, please. And here are 2 examples of the way those entries have played out in Turtle. You see that in my first example, I've chosen the concept reification. I've come up with the preferred label. It has a broader term called knowledge representation and reasoning. There's a definition that I've borrowed from Wikipedia. I've made an editorial note that says that in the KGC data, there actually isn't a URI that's been generated. So to make it consistent, we may want to create one. There's an exact match of the term with Wikidata, and it references, as we see above, the Wikipedia article on reification. Next. The next slide gets a little bit more complicated because I'm covering OWL. And here you see we do have an example of a KGC URI, the www.knowledgegraph.tech URI. It references Wikipedia, but it also has some connection to external materials, is referenced by points to the OWL module in Cogan's open curriculum. The other is referenced by points to an actual video on the KGC from, actually, no, it's not from one of the KGC events. It's actually from a book club meeting that references OWL. So here's where we start to tie things together in what might be considered a baby ontology. Now, make note, I'm using the DC terms is referenced by, and that's as specific as it gets. So we're not saying this points to online materials, this points to video materials, and so forth. So at some point, we'll have to decide whether to create new properties to do that, or more likely it will simply fit into the overall ontology that Cogan has already defined. Next, please. So we've got challenges with this project. The first, as I've already referenced, is how do you balance a taxonomy that covers so much ground? Because this one really does. Does it get separated out, or do we simply find a way to combine terminology with disciplines and all the other categories? The next thing is sources. I've been there. I know of at least one source that Cogan has mentioned that references certain data properties, because that's been a little bit of a challenge. When you have data management, data warehousing, all those different variations, trying to figure out how they fit together. Because I'm taking every one of these potential terms, candidate terms, and doing the research and going out and looking at Wikipedia and other sources. So if there's anything else we can connect to, it's all for the best. And of course, that also includes the things that I've also mentioned, which is connections to book club events, GitHub, wiki sections, online video, and other references. Another issue is link permanence. When we point to something, are they going to stay there or will they disappear? And to what extent do we either make sure that our links are referencing things that are likely to be there long term, or do we at some point create our own different URIs with reference materials there just to make sure that they persist? Link access is another issue, because we know some of the video sessions, at least from this conference, are behind paywalls. And so do we continue to make those references, or do we find some way to identify them as being not free? And finally, redundancy. I know in the KGC data, there are some redundant URIs created for terms. And even if we are taking materials from different sources, there are likely to be 3 or 4 versions of the same term with different URIs. So we're going to have to find a way to connect the dots to make sure that we have full coverage. And that's me. So I guess we move on to Steve.
All right, glad to get you properly in here, Steve. We went ahead and skipped your slide, so I'll rewind back to your pieces. And if you also wouldn't mind taking a minute or two to introduce yourself, I'm sure the audience would appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks much, Cogan, and thanks for patience with technical difficulties here. I've been participating in Knowledge Graph conferences since 2019, and so my background is as a technical writer and an instructional designer. I've done that for about 30 years. My interest in knowledge graphs comes from interest in jobs that I've had, the knowledge management role, and so but I've been researching knowledge graphs to model and researching knowledge graphs primarily out of my own personal interest, but also in an interest to develop curriculum related to knowledge graphs. So hence my involvement with this group. The on slide 11, so we have the knowledge graph. I guess the overall question that we are grappling with is could be represented by, if you just asked yourself as participants in this session, if you were to develop a knowledge graph about this Knowledge Graph Conference 2023, what would it look like? And so this is just a broad brush stroke to say, well, it would probably look something like this. And so there's a super event, which is the conference, could be considered just an event with several different sub-events underneath it. The sub-events are basically grouped by track. You have about 10 different tracks that you can choose from when you come to this conference. There's also different types of presentations. There's workshops and tutorials and keynote presentations, and the people that are developing software are giving sessions as well. So but typically the real content is delivered in sessions, and those sessions have titles. Those sessions have descriptions, a couple paragraphs about descriptions, and then they also have they're organized by themes, which is the tracks I already mentioned, and then each session also covers certain topics. If you go to the next slide, that illustrates that. So the name of one of the sessions is called Content Recommendation Systems. When do you need a graph? And it's classified under the ontologies, taxonomies, and data modeling track. And then, but this session actually deals with a number of relevant topics that are, kind of such as NLP. It deals with taxonomies, and it specializes in the healthcare and life sciences domain. So that's just a, if you're developing a knowledge graph about the conference, you'd probably need to cover that. That's what is in, the event is, the events are presented by speakers, so we would have to go to the next slide and talk about speakers. Knowledge Graph conference has speakers for each sub-event. There could be more than one speaker, and that each speaker has their own profile. The profile gives a little bit more detail about the speaker, their affiliations, their background biography, and gives photos linked in. There's a couple examples of two speakers, Fernando and Holly, and their biographies. So if you go to the next slide. Okay, one of the challenges that we are facing, and one of the things that Francois had suggested that we do, is develop a knowledge graph about the Knowledge Graph conference, and then use it in the curriculum, the open curriculum, to illustrate principles that we are trying to convey. So I was developing a taxonomy module, and the standards related to taxonomy are often, taxonomies are built on hierarchies, and there are 3 different types of hierarchies according to the Z39 standard for taxonomies developed by ANSI. And so, again, if you're looking different kinds of hierarchy, one type is generic specific hierarchy. And so there's an event type, and those specific kinds of event types are keynotes and tutorials and masterclasses. There's also class and instant types of hierarchies where the speaker, is a class, and then the individual speaker names are instances. And then there's whole part hierarchies. And so you could consider the speaker profile as kind of a whole part, in that each aspect of the speaker profile is a part, plays an integral part in the whole, which is the speaker profile. So I think that's about it. Cogan?
Oops, lost my spot. So yes, thank you so much, Steve, for introducing your stuff. Sorry that was a little bit out of order, but as you can see, it kind of how they bleed in together, how making sure that we have an appropriate way of describing both the people and the events and what they talk about really ties into the taxonomy, how to describe the broader categories of what needs to be talked about, to the educational curriculum itself is a really necessary component of any learning material. It's your index, but writ large and with a richer semantics. The end of that was all of our spoken content and organized content for the today. The rest of the session we were hoping to organize as a sort of unconference or community discussion. Let me see. I have a slide here with some things. Oh, I was going to also talk about contributing to the curriculum, so we can do that really quickly before we move into the open floor with questions and so on. So what we're looking for with the curriculum, you saw that the repository was a little bit bare bones. We're still looking for mappings. We know what the important questions are, but we're still looking for the commensurately important answers. The modules, what topics are we missing? And then what modules actually still need content written for them? Some of them are there that we know that we need them, but the content is actually empty. If you have any suggestions for people who you think would be interested in contributing their own interpretations or in own educational material, we are absolutely happy to engage with them. We're also looking for wider than just written material. So if you know any sort of videos, your own or other people that are freely available, we'd love to be able to connect to them. At the very end, we have the website itself. So if we go back to the repository, there is a guide to contributing. Feel free to use the Git functionality, the GitHub functionality, which is generally initiating a pull request, which might be only intuitive for those of you who are particularly technical in the audience. However, you are more than welcome to engage in a non-technical manner via the Slack channel and attending our weekly or bi-weekly calls in order to kind of help us understand the direction and the needs of what the curriculum needs to address. So with that, let's go ahead and open up the floor to questions and talking about the next steps with the curriculum KG and the curriculum content itself. There's a couple seed topics that we have, which is what actually does a materialized KG look like, and how does it actually reflect, or is it reflected as a function or as a functional piece of technology? Like, how do we use a materialized knowledge graph for the curriculum itself compared to just using the GitHub repository? The people problem is a sort of combination between we need people to to contribute to the curriculum, and then on the other hand, how do we adequately represent people, their affiliations, and their contributions? And then finally, Glenn and Steve have been really working towards the taxonomy of the topics. And Glenn kind of gave us an overview of the different challenges that the taxonomy faces, and really that the curriculum would face in the future as we grow wider than just written text in a repository. So I'll tab back over to the messages, chat, and everything. Looks like Francois has put the chat to the link to the KG itself. And then I can also put in the links to the curriculum. So happy if anybody has any questions that they might want to ask, and we can go from there. Francois, we have a question. How do I make it so that you can talk?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hey, I can also turn my video, although my camera is pretty bad. So, hey, I'm at KGC in my hotel room. Hi everyone, thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to thank Bita Bayahasheni, who recently worked on the most recent version of the KGC knowledge graph. So she added content from this year. There's a pull request on the repository that hasn't been merged yet, but you'll see there's a separate pull request where you can see the most recent content. So that was it.
Oh, great. Thank you.
So does that include 2022 then?
That includes 2022.
Okay, that's great.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully we'll work on 2023 soon.
Yeah, do you know who's going to be working on that, Francois?
No, I'm not sure yet. So this is an open project. If anyone is interesting to contribute, we are happy to provide the spreadsheet with the raw data. And the structure of the code should now be pretty clean. We haven't added the topic taxonomy, so I think this is something that still has to be done to integrate the topic taxonomy into that process to tag the talks.
Francois, can you talk a little about the source materials? Because on our end, we're kind of doing reverse engineering, pulling the turtle up and taking a look at it and trying to understand the different aspects, because it did change a little from 20 to 21, for example.
Yeah, we can, we can discuss like what would be the best format, and we have a spreadsheet, so happy to provide it in a convenient way.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, well, not sure how we want to go ahead and move forward. Was hoping for a little bit of engagement. I suppose if there are any questions, you can go ahead and type them out into the Q&A or the chat, or raise your hand. Looks like we have perfect.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Serdar Tamgoran. I teach data journalism at Stanford. Really happy that you all are working on this valuable resource. The folks that I deal with, data journalism students, they may have possibly heard of a knowledge graph, but really don't. They wouldn't know what you meant by Sparkle. Some of them know SQL. They have some basic data fluency, but for a lot of the projects that we want to work on, often the starting point is, are there any just absolutely simple resources that can help them wrap their brains around what this thing is and why it might matter for the kinds of work that we do? We often find ourselves filing records requests to obtain government data, and in course of working with it, we have to standardize that. And it would be wonderful to link to and or even create a resource of canonical entities, such as lists of local government agencies, planning and zoning commissions, school boards, things that just don't exist for a lot of the work that we do. And I was wondering if there's any super basic curriculum oriented around civic data, and also any tools for simply gathering, entering, and managing data as part of a knowledge graph.
Ooh, that is a big question, and also an important one. So, where to start? So the basic curriculum, I think, for just kind of educating people on what a knowledge graph is and why it's important, is what we're working on right now. There is at least a single module here that is what is a knowledge graph, that was written by students for students. So they go through what is metadata, what is a knowledge graph, with some examples. And then there's also the sort of linked material, which comes from the class that I taught, that has some of that basic curricular foundation. On the other hand, starting to look at how do you manage civic data in a knowledge graph, and what tools that you would use to do it. This is a really big open question, and it's I have two answers. One is a sort of shilling, self shilling here, and proselytization. There's a project out there right now called Nowhere Graph, spelled KNOWWHERE, graph, and it's nowheregraph.org. And this is one of the ways that we're kind of tying together civic data, maybe not to the level of granularity that you described in your sort of question, but is a knowledge graph form of unifying and semantically harmonizing a bunch of different federal government agency data. One of the challenges that we ran into is that state level data is really inconvenient to access because of how non-standard it is provided. And then on top of that, how non-standard it is across any state more than one, sometimes even within the same state. So that's a challenge that we face, as well as just knowledge engineers, that I think we can commiserate with journalists, for certain. To that point, though, the tools that we need in order to organize that data, this is something that I think we don't have a really good idea right now, of what these tools would look like and what they need to do. So honestly, one of the best ways for this to get done would be for you to kind of describe to us, in whatever format, an email, in an issue in the repository, or even right after I'm done talking, is what actually would be convenient for you, beyond like using ArcGIS for some geoinformation, or in environmental intelligence. Um, and yeah, that, I think I answered everything. Maybe not well, but I did.
No, that was great. And I'm going to check out nowhere. Graph.org. And, I can also, I don't want to hog all the time here, but in terms of simplicity of use of tools, I had been exploring like an installation of, say, Wikidata for our journalism community, that could then presumably interoperate to some degree with the main Wikidata itself if we were trying to crowdsource some knowledge, or at least make it publicly available. I also know the Google folks have worked on datacommons.org, and they, in theory, you can set up your own instance of datacommons.org. So I don't know if some sort of a federated model makes sense, but I'd love to talk to you all perhaps offline about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I did not put up the last slide with all of our info on it. I should probably do that. I'll do that right now. And then you can certainly reach out to me and the others at your convenience.
I'm curious. I hope this is for the greater good. How did you get interested in this, and when you started thinking that you were interested in it for your students, how did you begin to research the subject? I always refer to myself as a constant learner, perpetual novice, and a lot of trying to research this topic feels like diving into the deep end of the pool. So I'd be curious about how you approached learning about it.
Yeah, great question. So I guess about 10 years or so ago, we were cleaning up some, I think, school-related data. I was at the Washington Post at the time, and we used OpenRefine to tap into Freebase, if that was a thing back then, if I'm remembering right, and reconcile some entities. And I was shocked at how well it worked, and that kind of led me down a little bit of a rabbit hole. I'm still most definitely an amateur, but once I, drifted into academia from being straight up in the news business, this was one of the subjects I wanted to really dive into, because we were constantly trying to think about, well, how do we model this data in a way that will help us with all the data pipelines that we have running in a newsroom? We're bringing in all these different streams of data from everywhere, from local to the federal, and it would be nice if we could connect these things together and do some more powerful reporting, especially investigative reporting with it. And so I'll be honest, it was this conference that I found a few years back, I think maybe in 19 or 20. And that's been the main source of my learning, in addition to like Bob Ducharme's Sparkle book and, some other miscellaneous resources out there. So really deeply appreciate the fact that you all are organizing this curriculum, and just the broader conference is a great resource.
Thank you. That's great.
Yeah, it would. I would love to have that just referenced. I have it written down, of course, but if you had the time and energy, it would be great if you could kind of briefly list out the sort of foundational topics that you think would be most useful for your students to approach first. I have an opinion, of course, as a knowledge engineer and a computer scientist, but that does not necessarily transfer to the broader community. So it would be great if you would be willing to kind of provide that viewpoint from the journalism standpoint. What is most useful for, or what sort of questions do you have that would be most useful for us to answer, and especially from a learner's point of view?
Cogan is selling himself short. I have never seen anyone do a better job of explaining the subject to normal human beings, of which I'm one. So I think we couldn't have a better guide for this particular project.
Well, thanks, Glenn. All right, we have another question. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Sartor. All right. How much more time do we have? Do we have until the half hour or until 3?
I believe it's 3.
Well, I don't want to make this tortuous for anybody who's just kind of chilling in the in the session. Not not really willing or interested in or really have any big things. Okay, yeah, thank you for putting this up. We have a survey here about the conference and the sessions and the support and all of that. It would be really useful if you guys could fill this out. The QR code should take you to the survey, and then we'd be extremely willing to hear any feedback that you might have. Thanks for stopping in. I'll stick around for a little bit longer if anybody has any questions and they'd prefer a less open discussion, or if you just need a place to hide from the other sessions. So thank you very much. And thank you, Glenn and Steve, for being willing to contribute your ideas and your work so far on the curriculum.
You bet.